We've all had the sad occasion of being at the funeral or the burial of a loved one and then being with the family afterwards as they adjust to the loss, as we sometimes call it, in their lives. In John chapter 11, Jesus comes to the home of Mary and Martha and their brother Lazarus. Lazarus has died, and now Mary and Martha are in tremendous grief. And they had called for Jesus, sent for him to come, and then finally he arrives. But upon his arrival, John chapter 11 tells us in verse 17 that Lazarus had already been in the grave, he'd already been buried 4 days. It also tells us that many Jews had come from Jerusalem and other places to comfort Mary and Martha. But that one person that they had called for, very specifically Jesus, had been absent. So when Martha, the first to know that Jesus is there, approaches him, she says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And her grief was speaking. She almost was rebuking Jesus. She was almost saying, this wouldn't have happened if you'd been here. This wouldn't have happened if you had come when I called you. Jesus doesn't respond to that. Jesus doesn't rebuke her back. Jesus doesn't say, "Hey, I've got this all covered and don't you worry about this because I know what I'm doing." Jesus just lets her grief talk. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to let human beings be human. We just have to let them talk and let their grief talk, knowing that eventually it will kind of level out and they'll be able to see things a little more clearly rather than being clouded by the profoundness and the painfulness of the grief. Well, Jesus then turns Martha's attention to him. And he says that I am the resurrection and the life. He says to her that your brother will rise again. And I think there's a great deal of counsel here and application that when we are dealing with people in grief and profound sorrow, rather than trying to offer words of our own wisdom, even though we may have some great wisdom, let's offer the words of Jesus. Let's offer comfort that comes by pointing to Jesus and remembering who Jesus is and what Jesus can do. Because there, the greatest comfort will always be found. Let's comfort one another with these words.